Once upon a time, in a grand kingdom, there lived an emperor who was excessively fond of new clothes. He spent all his wealth on being elegantly dressed, to the extent that he neglected his soldiers, his kingdom, and even the affairs of state. Every hour of the day, he had a different outfit, and instead of saying, as one might about any other king, "He is in council," they always said of him, "The emperor is in his dressing room." In the great city where he resided, life was always bustling. Every day, new visitors came to the city, and among them one day arrived two swindlers. They introduced themselves as weavers and claimed they could make the finest cloth imaginable. Not only were their colors and patterns exceptionally beautiful, but the clothes made of this cloth had a wonderful way of becoming invisible to anyone who was unfit for their position or hopelessly stupid. The emperor was delighted. Those would be just the clothes for me, he thought. If I wore them, I would be able to discover which men in my empire are unfit for their posts. And I could tell the wise men from the fools. Yes, I certainly must get some of this cloth woven for me immediately. He paid the two swindlers a large sum of money to start work at once. They set up two looms and pretended to weave, though there was nothing on the looms. They demanded the finest silk and the purest gold thread, which they put into their own bags, and then they continued their work at the empty looms until late into the night. I'd like to know how the weavers are getting on with the cloth, the emperor thought. But he felt slightly uncomfortable when he remembered that those who were unfit for their position would not be able to see the fabric. Personally, he was confident he had nothing to fear, but still, he decided to send someone else to see how the work was progressing. I'll send my honest old minister to the weavers, the emperor thought. He's the best one to see how the cloth looks, for he is a man of sense, and no one can be more suitable for his job than he is. So the honest old minister went to the room where the two swindlers sat working at the empty looms. Heaven help me, he thought as his eyes flew wide open. I can't see anything at all. But he did not say so. Both the swindlers begged him to be so kind as to come nearer to the looms and asked him whether the design pleased him and whether the colors were not beautiful. They pointed to the empty looms, and the poor old minister stared as hard as he dared. He couldn't see anything because there was nothing to see. Heaven have mercy, he thought. Can it be that I'm a fool? I'd have never guessed it. And not a soul must know. Am I unfit to be the minister? It would never do to let on that I can't see the cloth. Don't hesitate to tell us what you think of it, said one of the weavers. Oh, it's beautiful, it's enchanting, the old minister peered through his spectacles. Such a pattern, what colors? I'll be sure to tell the emperor how delighted I am with it. We're pleased to hear that, the swindlers said. They proceeded to name all the colors and to explain the intricate pattern. The old minister paid the closest attention so he could tell it all to the emperor. And so he did. The swindlers at once asked for more money, more silk, and gold thread to get on with the weaving. But it all went into their pockets. Not a thread went onto the looms, though they worked at their weaving as hard as ever. The emperor presently sent another trustworthy official to see how the work was progressing and how soon it would be ready. The same thing happened to him that had happened to the minister. He looked and looked, but as there was nothing to see on the looms, he couldn't see anything. Isn't it a beautiful piece of cloth? The swindlers asked him, as they displayed and described their imaginary pattern. I know I'm not stupid, the man thought, so it must be that I'm unworthy of my good position. That's strange. I mustn't let anyone find it out, though. So he praised the cloth he did not see and remarked how pleased he was with the beautiful colors and the exquisite pattern. To the emperor, he said, it held me spellbound. All the town was talking of this splendid cloth, and the emperor wanted to see it for himself while it was still on the loom. With a band of his most trusted advisers, including the two who had already seen the cloth, he set out to see the two swindlers. He found them weaving with might and main, but without a thread on their looms. Magnificent, said the two officials who had already been there. Just look, Your Majesty, what colors! What a design! They pointed to the empty looms, each believing that the others could see the cloth. What's this? Thought the emperor. I can't see anything. This is terrible. Am I a fool? Am I unfit to be the emperor? What a thing to happen to me, of all people. Oh, it's beautiful, he said. It has my highest approval. And he nodded appreciatively at the empty loom. Nothing could make him say that he couldn't see anything. His whole retinue stared and stared. One saw no more than another, but they all joined the emperor in exclaiming, "Oh! It's beautiful!" And they advised him to wear clothes made of this wonderful cloth, especially for the great procession he was soon to lead. Magnificent! Excellent! Unsurpassed, were bandied from mouth to mouth, and everyone did his best to seem well pleased. The emperor gave each of the swindlers a cross to wear in their buttonhole and the title of Sir Weaver. Before the procession, the swindlers sat up all night and burned more than 6 candles to show how busy they were finishing the emperor's new clothes. They pretended to take the cloth off the loom. They made cuts in the air with huge scissors, and at last, they said, now the emperor's new clothes are ready for him. Then the emperor himself came with his noblest noblemen, and the swindlers each raised an arm as if they were holding something. This is the coat, here is the trousers, here is the mantle, they said. All of them are as light as a spider web. One would almost think he had nothing on, but that's what makes them so fine. Exactly, all the noblemen agreed, though they could see nothing, for there was nothing to see. Would your imperial majesty, if it pleases, graciously undress, said the swindlers. We will help you put on your new clothes here in front of the long mirror. The emperor undressed, and the swindlers pretended to put his new clothes on him, one garment after another. They took him around the waist and seemed to be fastening something, that was his train, as the emperor turned round and round before the looking-glass. How well your majesty's new clothes look! Aren't they becoming? He heard on all sides, that pattern, so perfect. Those colors, so suitable. It is a magnificent outfit. The master of ceremonies announced, the canopy, which is to be carried over your majesty in the procession, is waiting outside. Well, I'm supposed to be ready, the emperor said and turned again for one last look in the mirror. It is a remarkable fit, isn't it? He seemed to regard his costume with the greatest interest. The noblemen who were to carry his train stooped low and reached for the floor as if they were picking up his mantle. Then they pretended to lift and hold it high. They didn't dare admit they had nothing to hold. So off went the emperor in the procession under his splendid canopy. Everyone in the streets and the windows said, "Oh, how fine are the emperor's new clothes! Don't they fit him to perfection? And see his long train." Nobody would confess that he couldn't see anything, for that would prove him either unfit for his position or a fool. No costume the emperor had worn before was ever such a complete success. But he hasn't got anything on, a little child said. Did you ever hear such innocent prattle? Said its father. And one person whispered to another what the child had said, he hasn't anything on. A child says he hasn't anything on. But he hasn't got anything on, the whole town cried out at last. The emperor shivered, for he suspected they were right. But he thought, this procession has got to go on. So he walked more proudly than ever, as his noblemen held high the train that wasn't there at all, and so, the story of the emperor's new clothes became a timeless reminder of the dangers of vanity and the importance of honesty.